Good evening from Dubai. Good morning in Colombia. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
You are chairperson of the Responsible Tourism Association in Colombia. And today we're talking about biodiversity and tourism and the balance between tourism and nature. But maybe we can start off and I can ask you a little bit about the transformation of tourism in a relatively new destination.
Yeah, absolutely. So, well, as you might know, Colombia is relatively new in the tourism map. Although, you know, Colombia is a country that has historically been a very important point from the colonial times because of the trade all inside Latin America, because it was like a gate of entrance. Well, I mean, Colombia has never stopped to be relevant in the map, but however, we have been in an internal war for almost 60 years. Due to, I mean, I'm not going to go to the causes, but it has to do with a lot of social inequity and so guerrilla problems, especially with FARC, and then 2016 peace agreement between government and FARC, and then we saw like this opportunity to seize this moment of making this big peace agreement with the largest guerrilla group for a huge transformation to what we see in the future in Colombia in terms of stable peace. So even before the peace agreement, things were changing for the better. Colombia started to see a social transformation going on in different parts of the territory. And there's very interesting cases, for example, in the city of Medellin with all these social innovation that the city has gone through, and it has to do with urbanism and architecture. And in other rural areas, there are amazing cases of social transformation even before the peace agreement. So that started to be a draw for visitors. And Colombia had been, in a way, preserved because of the fact that we hadn't had much tourism in the early 90s, early 2000s, only started to ramp up after, I would say, 2010, 2011 was the moment that we started to see an increase in international tourism. So because of that, it's something that we call the green side of war. So war has preserved a lot of areas in the country. If we compare to other countries like neighboring Brazil or Peru, or even Ecuador, that they haven't had this problem with war. So the development brought by agriculture, like livestock industry and other industries that are extracting nature has advanced a lot. In Colombia, we don't see that case. Of course, we have a lot of problems that has to do with diversity, deforestation, but not as large as our neighbors. So we're in this moment that Colombia is opening and has so much to offer. Also, in terms of culture, it's a very similar thing. Colombia is a country that, because of its geography, you know, in Colombia, we have a point in the south of Colombia crossing with Ecuador with the Andes, just breaking to 3 mountain ranges. So these vast geographical settings and the way that the Andes are just breaking the country in 3 and everything is so isolated in a way, it creates the conditions for culture and nature that is very well preserved. So the industry has been leveraging on this preservation to really bring to the world something special.
You really have a unique opportunity not to repeat some of the mistakes made in other parts of the world and building it from the outset in a way that balances nature, people, and tourism growth. So let's turn to the impact on communities, because often communities bear the opportunity cost for the assets we sell in the tourism industry. And it should provide sustainable alternative livelihoods to unsustainable practices. How do communities benefit, and how does that benefit biodiversity and nature?
Well, I think tourism has a very interesting feature as an industry that can compete with other industries, and is that tourism has very low entry barriers. Some people would say it as a negative thing. I see it as a very positive thing, because that means that, let's talk about a specific community that has been kind of remote, a bit isolated, where the opportunities of development don't reach. Even the presence of the state is not that strong. However, tourism can reach geographies where other kind of industries or opportunities can't reach. Second, if you are a community and you have this trail and you have like this species of bird that is something that is already there, you have your culture, your music, your food, you already have something very valuable. You already have the asset that you need to incorporate into tourism value chain if you know how to value it and if you know how to communicate it. So that's the thing with tourism. Tourism, due to low entry barriers, it spreads the opportunities across the territory. So tourism can be really this economic force to provide for an alternative to war-related economies. When we talk about war-related economies, I'm talking about narco trafficking, and also the whole supply chain of narco trafficking, and also war-based economies. Basically, you know, since in Colombia, a lot of parts in the country were basically run by guerrillas, so the economy was based on war. So tourism can actually come and offer alternatives for local for sustainable development, which no other industry, and again, in some cases, even the presence of the state is not there, tourism can reach.
So besides leading the Responsible Tourism Association in Colombia, you're also represent industry. You're an industry leader in your own right, as CEO and co-founder of Impulse Travel. How do you see travelers respond to responsible tourism? Is there growing demand? And then also immersive travel?
Well, the thing, Shaun, is that the travelers are actually more sensitive to and a bit more knowledgeable about the fact that they traveling creates an impact, environmental, and also can create a positive impact according to the decisions they make with the kind of services they hire. So there's a growing awareness, but I wouldn't say that there's a growing demand for sustainable tourism per se. I mean, the demand, I would say that it's only a niche of travelers that say, I focus on traveling sustainably. People when travel, they're on their holidays. Usually we as human beings are very selfish. We're thinking about ourselves, we're thinking about our safety, we're thinking about our budget, we're thinking about our experience. What can we do to bring back home, and how this trip, what's in this trip for me, right? So the thing is that something that we have discovered is that if we market front and center sustainability and responsibility as the main product feature, market, I mean, there's going to be a segment for that, but we don't want that. We want sustainable travel to reach a wider spectrum of the customer segments. So the way that we have been working, I'm talking about from the Impulse perspective, is we don't approach the travelers saying like, buy from us because we are sustainable tourism. We say, buy from us because you're going to have an amazing experience. We're going to have the opportunity to connect with locals and to learn about different stories that you wouldn't learn otherwise. You will have access to things that as a tourist, without us, you would never have access to. Some things that are hidden, that are special, that are immersive. But at the same time, the operating system and the business model that we have to run our tours incorporates community-based projects that are supporting social transformation in local communities. So that's the catch. I mean, of course we communicate it, of course we let travelers know about it, but that's not the unique selling point.
So COVID-19 led to a slowdown in travel and tourism worldwide, and I think Colombia has one of the longest lockdowns in the world, probably along with this country I come from in South Africa. So what does that mean, you know, that slowdown in travel and tourism mean for conservation, and especially the communities that depend heavily on tourism as a service export?
Well, there's so many different cases, Shaun, so generalizing here is hard, but I can talk about what I have seen from my personal perspective and from the perspective of Impulse. So of course, we saw suddenly someone just turned off the switch of tourism just overnight. So we were having a very good year in Colombia. Last year, we saw like a 5% increase in international visitors. We were aiming to a similar figure for 2020. And then March, then the tourism demand dropped. And so since a lot of communities were already depending on tourism, we have seen communities going under very difficult circumstances economically, at the beginning especially. But now what we have seen is that, and I can speak for Colombian, is that our people have been used to so many hard hits, and the resiliency is so much engraved in our genes that over just a few months, we started to see the projects that we work with that were dedicated to tourism coming up with many different ideas that were not necessarily related to tourism. Some of them going to work the land, some of them coming up with even salsa Zoom classes for one of the projects in Medellin. Others were just doing gastronomy and selling that online and to friends. So we started to see how they have been coming up with different ideas to be not depending on tourism. And we started to support this process and we formulated a program called Leaders of Change, which we are hoping to support 15 community-based organizations to pivot their business model so it's not dependent on tourism. And we have had help from Colombia, from Tourism Cares, from Booking.com to fund this project. And right now we are in the middle of this project, and we're seeing how these community-based projects really have a lot to say. And this, as I said before, this resiliency and this capacity to come up with something different has something that has been mind-blowing.
I love this resilience of a human spirit and triggering innovation. So easily just sit back and wait for somebody else to solve it.
Yeah, well, that's not to say, I mean, that's a general idea, and that's the best possible ideas. Of course, there are some cases that have not been exactly like this. Of course, there are communities that are having a hard time making their ends meet. You know, it's very hard for a lot of people. A lot of people are suffering. So I don't want to generalize this. I'm just talking about from the more appreciative and the more optimistic part of what we have witnessed in the pandemic.
Well, thank you so much for spending time with us this evening. Best of luck with rebuilding and pivoting and with building the responsible tourism sector. Thank you.
Okay, Shaun. Thank you so much.